Today on Cryptic Mass Guitar, we take a look at the differences between the Gibson USA SG Special and the Gibson Custom 1963 SG Special VOS. Now, I shouldn't have to say this here, but I have to, because we're looking at a guitar here that is moderately expensive and comparing it spec-wise to an expensive guitar. Now, that gets people a little uppity and generally promotes I wouldn't buy either of them, or someone saying I would only buy the Gibson USA, you're stupid if you buy the Custom, and some people saying I would only buy the Custom, you're stupid if you buy the USA. Just let people enjoy their guitars. There's also three letters that I'm going to use here that are just going to make people just extremely, they're going to sweat. They're going to get so upset. And it's really, really stupid. So I'm going to clarify that right now. So the three letters here are VOS. In the past, Gibson has used VOS for vintage old stock, vintage original stock, vintage original spec, which I believe is actually a copyright for the auto industry, vintage original specification, which I believe Gibson still holds the copyright for. Just a whole bunch of different things. Currently, it's not used as vintage original specification. It's currently to indicate the finish type for the Nitro, to differentiate it from Murphy Lab, and it's also used for the finish type on the hardware itself. So currently, vintage original sheen is what Gibson is using VOS for. So when I say VOS, which stands for vintage original sheen, that's because that's what Gibson wants it to be noted as and it differentiates it from Murphy Lab. So VOS stands for vintage original specification. Look, there's a copyright notice from Gibson. That's just, in the past, yes, VOS, different things. But it's okay. You'll be fine. So now that those two stupid things are out of the way, there's not going to be any playing in this video. I'm going to be doing a comparison video between both of these where I go through like sound samples and stuff like that and give you like my actual thoughts on the guitars as well. But this video here, I'm just going to be going over like spec differences, and I'll show you some different things. We'll take the covers off on the back. So it's basically just to show you, yeah, like, because we know there's a price difference between these. There's different, things that go into it. So we're going to just go over that. Also, some of these things, if they don't matter to you, then they don't matter to you. If they matter to you, then they matter to you. There's just two types of guitar nerds. There's happy guitar nerds, which I kind of consider myself a happy guitar nerd because I'm happy to see the differences. It interests me. It piques my interest. Seeing all the different things where they try to, replicate things from the past. And then there's just the nerds that are just looking to correct people, which just be a happy guitar nerd. And so some of these things can be considered tinfoil hat. If they don't matter to you, then they don't matter to you. Let's start off with the finish. So the Gibson USA here has a gloss nitro cellulose finish. The Gibson Custom here has a VOS nitro cellulose finish, vintage original sheen. We talked about this, remember? So it's got a bit of a vintage patina on it. Basically, this is thicker than this. So that actually helps with resonance while also maintaining the presence feel of the guitar. So as far as color, on the Gibson USA, we have ebony or we have vintage cherry. On the Custom Shop, we have cherry red, which is achieved by using aniline dye. One thing to note here, over time, this color here will fade a little more, like it traditionally should have, from when they originally made them. The ebony or the vintage cherry won't fade as much. Taking a look at the wood in the body, the Gibson USA is typically a two-piece mahogany body. I know, you're the one that has the only single-piece mahogany body. Gibson is extremely good at hiding their seams. I have a Les Paul Special that took me a year and a half to actually find the seam, and it was simply because of aging. Like, you could not tell where that seam was. But they typically use 2 pieces of mahogany. The Gibson Custom uses a single piece of mahogany, and both of these, the mahogany is like sourced and selected. So there's typical weights and variances that they allow for certain things. So they use different types of mahogany in the USA than they do in the Custom. You're also going to note that the carving of the mahogany is different. So taking a look at the Gibson USA here, you'll note that the carving is like, it's some nice carving. But when you look at the Gibson Custom, you'll note that it's more of like a deeper carve, a little more 3D effect that goes into it. And as far as the neck here, still gloss nitro finish and VOS. I know we talked about this finish here on the necks. Both of these are mahogany necks. They should both be single piece, but the verbiage that they use on the USA is just mahogany, whereas it's single piece mahogany for the verbiage on the Gibson Custom. The way that the necks are fitted here, this is tinfoil hat area, and the way that the fretboards are placed in, would be a hide glue fit on the Custom shop and tight bond glue on the Gibson USA. Hot hide glue, again, this is tinfoil hat area, but it crystallizes when it hardens, so it gives you a little more of a solid connection between the wood, so it kind of fuses the wood together. To me, I mean, there's so many different things that go into the differences between the USA and the Custom, but all of my Custom shops, they just ring out like one solid piece, whereas they sound really good on the USA, but not the same on the Customs. The Gibson USA also uses a short neck tenon, whereas the Gibson Custom uses a long neck tenon. As far as neck carves, both of these have slim taper necks. However, we have just a traditional slim taper here, whereas on the 1963 Custom shop, we have a, what do they call it? Traditional C-profile slim taper neck, which if you feel it, it's ever so slightly thicker, like 0.5 millimeter, but it's something like if you're playing them all the time, you notice. Both guitars feature rosewood fretboards that are bound. On the Gibson USA, we have fret nibs, and these fret nibs here are a little bit thicker, whereas the bound rosewood board on the Gibson Custom has the smaller fret nibs. We're also looking at a little bit thinner binding. Another thing of note here is the fact that they scrape the nitro off for their binding. So one thing that you'll always note on Gibson USA guitars, when you look at the Graphtec nut, you usually see a razor blade mark, and then you'll usually see like a little scrape mark where the nitro has been scraped away and like the spot for the nut. When you look at the Gibson Custom, you do not see that. You actually see, because it's a nylon nut here rather than the Graphtec nut, you actually just see the nylon nut. You don't see the scrape marks. If you actually take a look at the back of the body as well, if you look at the back where the body carves or angles slightly down to the like where the neck pocket is to the neck heel, it's not a very like deep or long angled carve on the Gibson USA, but on the Gibson Custom shop you can actually see there's a deeper carve here, and there's a little bit more of an angle to it. The Gibson USA has medium jumbo frets, whereas the Gibson Custom has authentic medium jumbo frets. We have acrylic inlays on the Gibson USA, whereas we have perloid inlays on the Gibson Custom. Taking a look at the front of the headstock, it's an SG Special, so we shouldn't have a whole bunch of stuff here. We have blank truss rod covers, and then we have, on the Gibson USA, we have a silk screened Gibson logo. Prior to 2019, I think it was, or 2020, it was an inlaid logo here. On the Gibson Custom here, you'll note that we do have an inlaid cellulose nitrate Gibson logo. And just because when it comes to SG videos, people get a little bit anal, the truss rod cover here is different on the USA than it is on the custom shop. It's just a thicker ply of the white here on the custom shop. So taking a look at the back of the headstock, this is where you're going to find the tuners. On the Gibson USA, we have the Gibson Vintage Deluxe Clouson style tuners with the white oval buttons. On the Gibson Custom, we have Clouson 3 on a plate VOS. We talked about this. Aged tuners. And if we flip things back around, the Gibson USA has modern size tuners. That means if you wanted to upgrade your tuners to like locking tuners or Grovers, you have to drill pilot holes in the back to match the Grover tuners, but you can do so without reaming out the holes for the tuners. On the Gibson USA, however, we have vintage size tuners. That means that the posts here are smaller. So if you wanted to upgrade this for some reason to like a more modern tuner, you would have to ream out the holes to widen them in the headstock. Now if we take a look at the toggle switches, you'll note that they have cream switch tips. This is important to some people, even though switch tips are like super cheap. Then take a look at the pick guards here. The Gibson USA has a 5-ply pick guard, whereas the Gibson Custom Shop has a 5-ply pick guard. For some reason, the specs actually note that it's a 3-ply, but it is actually a 5-ply pick guard. And yes, they are different pick guards. I'm going to get into that in a minute. Taking a look at the bridge here, the Gibson USA has the lightning bar wraparound. So it's a compensated wraparound, whereas the Gibson Custom has the lightning bar, so a compensated wraparound. But it's with the hardware, it's slightly aged, so it's got that VOS. We talked about this. Finish to it. Now we are talking about SG specials. So the Gibson USA here has P90 soap bar style pickups, whereas the Gibson Custom has custom P90 soap bar pickups. I remember when I talked about the pick guards being different, there's a reason for that. It's not just the fact that it's, oh, this is the custom shop, so the pick guard has to be different. It actually has to do with pickup spacing. So if you look, the pickups are in different places. If you look at both bodies, the bridge is in the exact same position on both guitars. There's like 7.5 inches from the bottom of the body, I believe. However, the spacing from the bridge to the bridge pickup on the Gibson USA is 1/2 inch, whereas the spacing on the Gibson Custom from the bridge to the bridge pickup is 1 inch. The spacing between the pickups on the Gibson USA is sitting at 2 1/3 inches apart, whereas the spacing on the Gibson Custom is 1 3/4 inches apart. And finally, to round things out with, yes, why the pick guards are different, because this is the biggest one here. The spacing from the neck pickup to the neck is sitting at 3/4 inches here on the Gibson USA, and on the Gibson Custom, from the neck pickup to the neck is 1 inch. Both guitars also have 2 volumes and 2 tones. Taking the control cavity cover off on the Gibson USA, you'll note that we have CTS. Generally, they are Gibson branded. So if you have, it says CTS or Gibson branded, it's normal. But we do have the CTS audio taper potentiometers with orange drop capacitors. Doing the same on the Gibson Custom here, you'll note that we have CTS audio taper potentiometers, and then we have those Black Beauty potentiometers. So when you look at things like pricing differences, when it comes to orange drop capacitors, sourcing those like in Canada, you'll probably pay anywhere from like $6 to $12 each. The Black Beauty capacitors, it's hard to say. It's hard to say where they source them and where they get them and how authentic they are to the the originals and stuff like that. But the Black Beauty capacitors can run you like $40 to $200. People are crazy about capacitors. I got into them really nuts a while back, and I spent a lot of money on a set of Vitamin Q Sprague capacitors that I never installed in a guitar because it sounded fine without them. Both guitars also have Switchcraft output jacks. And finally, it would not be an SG video without appeasing some of the giant nerds. They're happy nerds, but they're giant nerds. They're nerdier than I am. And we got to talk about the strap buttons here. So the strap buttons on the Gibson USA are slightly larger than the strap button on the Gibson Custom. There, I got you covered. I'm absolutely certain there are other spec differences between these guitars. You can leave them in the comments down below. When it comes to SG videos and talking about specs, I don't know why the people get a little nerdier on the SGs than they do with the Les Pauls. And there's usually the VOS does not stand for original Sheen. You're nuts. The copyright notice. Look at the copyright notice. But then you usually get the friendly nerds that are like, hey, also, this is different. Or also, this is different. Or the funny ones are, you didn't mention the neck tenon. And then a second comment, actually you did, never mind. But there is one last thing that I want to take a look at here for each guitar. And to me, these things here, in my house, they have their own room. I'd like to change that because I'd like to actually put in a bathroom here instead of having a case room. But we'll see how that works out. But I want to talk about the cases and the accessories that actually come with the guitars, or like the, case candy. This is something that if I've bought a guitar, or I'm going to buy a guitar, say it's Monday, I'm buying a guitar Friday or Saturday, or I've ordered a guitar. I'm one of those guys, because I work so much, and I spend all my time usually working, and in order to not go absolutely insane, I obsess about guitars and amps and stuff like that. So it's usually why I have so many, because if the income from that, and I need to keep my sanity. But what I end up doing if I'm ordering a guitar or whatever is I look at pictures of the guitars in their cases and the case candy. And then when I get them home, I get them out of the case, and the guitar is the only thing that matters. I usually forget what comes in the case, or even what color the case was. No, I remember the case colors. But here's the case that comes with the Gibson USA. There's the inside of the case. What you get inside the case for the Gibson USA would be a leather strap. Everybody's favorite baby picture, so a picture of the guitar on the workbench. The keys to the case, the warranty information card with the pre-pack checklist. For Gibson USA, this is what people will call the certificate of authenticity, and an accessory pouch. Inside the accessory pouch, we have an owner's manual, we have a Gibson polish cloth, and then we have the multi-tool. So this has screwdrivers and a truss rod adjustment tool and stuff like that. So this, in all honesty, usually because I have so many of them, my wife usually has them in the kitchen because of the little tiny screwdriver. The Gibson Custom comes with, it doesn't look as fancy as the other one, does it? But it is. It comes with a Lifton case, gold interior. And this is what you get inside the case. You don't typically have this. This is just the hang tag from the store itself with the price. You get a hang tag advertising the vintage reissue strings, which I'm actually thinking of changing from D'Addario to those. You get the keys to the case. You get an advertisement for the Gibson app, which is, again, very 1963 of them. You get a hang tag for Gibson Custom. We have what is sort of like an instruction manual, but it's like a warranty information and warranty registration card here. It's like a little pamphlet. And then we get what comes on the Gibson USA, what they consider the certificate of authenticity, so the pre-pack checklist and warranty information. But with Gibson Custom, we actually get a proper certificate of authenticity and a little tiny booklet with the serial number handwritten on it and everything. So there's just a little bit more that goes into it, but again, that is built into the pricing. And what's also nifty is that there's only a few guys that actually do the pre-pack checklist. So for Gibson USA, it could be like a whole bunch of different people, but I think out of the 8 custom shops that I have right now, I think 7 of them were inspected by that Tyler guy. I think his name is Tyler. Pretty cool. So that's it. I'll talk very, very, very briefly on a few things on the guitars. Like I said, I'm doing a comparison video between both of them, and that'll be out after this video. Certain things when it comes to USA versus custom shop, it's a finer, like a smaller area, and a more highly trained group of individuals that work on your guitar. So a big thing to liken it, like with Fender Custom, it's the same thing. It's a smaller area, you know, a finite amount of people, and then they have like master builders and stuff. So with Gibson USA, it's a larger group, larger building. They're expected to push out more because more people will buy them, right? So when it comes to the Gibson Customs, there's more handwork that goes into it than on the Gibson USA. Another thing of note here, Gibson USA versus Gibson Custom, they're both plecked. They both go through the pleck machine. They're both set up. However, there's a different setup, and I don't know what it is, but like I live in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So the climate that's here, or the temperatures that are here, range from like don't go outside because it's too cold to don't go outside, stay in with the air conditioning. And my studio is in my basement, so that means in the winter, this is the hottest area in the house, and in the summer, this is the coolest, or parts of the summer, this is the coolest area in the house. And then it kind of regulates its temperature. So there can be a variance in temperature in this part of my house. I mean, humidification is very, very important. You need to do that during certain periods. But one thing I can really note here is I have not had to adjust the truss rods or anything on the Gibson Customs. But the Gibson USA, and especially any of the Fender guitars that I've owned, once a year I have to just make like not even a quarter turn. But you know what I mean? They do get that bow like this from temperature change. The Gibson Custom, I don't know what it is, but I haven't had to do that whatsoever. And I'm a person that keeps my tuning, like if I go to pick up a guitar, it's not this one's in E standard, this one's in drop D, this one's in E flat, this one's, you know what I mean? I could go pick up any guitar. One could be in Dag Dad and B, one could be in Dad Gad and C, one could be in E standard. Like, you know what I mean? It could be anything, and any given day of the week they could change. So there's a variance in what tuning and the string tension at any given moment on any of my guitars. The only other guitar manufacturer that I've really experienced that with, although I do have to say the Fender vintage guitars I've never had to adjust, so that's something of note. The only other guitar manufacturer that I've experienced or haven't had to have that experience with was Paul Reed Smith, and that has to do with their wood drying process. Paul Reed Smith, to me, mathematically perfect guitars. I used to absolutely love them. I just don't get along with them anymore. I'd love to try a 594 though. Back of my mind. Also, getting the Gibson Custom Shop reissues, I've never had to make personal adjustments to them. You know what I mean? So I haven't had to like change string height or change intonation or anything like that. The Gibson USA, again, the climate here is different. So really cold, really hot, any given moment could be very different. So generally when I get like a Fender guitar or a Gibson USA guitar, I bring it home and I set it up for me. Usually I'm adjusting things like the stop bar goes down if it has a stop bar on it, so I get more tension. I might raise the bridge to, you know, fit my needs for string height, which could be different from anyone else. I don't usually adjust the truss rod until, you know, it's gone through that temperature change over a year, but I haven't had to do that on the Gibson Custom Shops. That doesn't mean that your preferences are different or can't be different than mine. So when you get them, you might have to adjust them because you might like your string height a little higher or a little lower, or there could be different things. But for me, I've never experienced that on a custom shop reissue. And I'll also address the glue because I'm someone that I never ever wanted to play. Like, I spent almost 30 years without playing a custom shop reissue for the simple fact that, holy God, they're expensive. Like, I always thought, $4,000 or $5,000, maybe $6,000. That's tops on a guitar, right? Like, that's a really expensive guitar. And about a year ago, because the other guy on the channel, Kevin, bought a 59, and when he got it home, he's you don't know what you're missing. You need to go and try one of these. You have to. Like, there is no way that you can't go and do it. And I didn't want to look at the 59s because I've always been a 58 or a 57 kind of guy, right? I like the chunkier necks. So I tried a 58, and that just completely changed everything. I got a 58, and like a week later, I think not even, I got a 57, then a week later I got a 59, then I got a 56, then I got a 61, then a 64, and now a 63. So they're just another level. But part of that has to do with the construction. So I can't narrow it down what the differences are. When it comes to like the guitars that have stop bars, the ABR ones are drilled directly into the body. That means there's no like metal doweling system. That means it's directly into the wood, right? So there's got to be a vibrancy change there. And then the glues that are used, because it crystallizes, everything rings out as one solid piece. So to me, I have to think it has to do with the glue. And a big reason behind that is when I was younger, the music store that was eventually bought out by Long & McQuaid, the music store I used to go to in Halifax, Nova Scotia, was called Music Stop. They had this little sandwich shop in the corner. And I love telling this story, but I remember going in there when I was younger, and the guitars were right next to, like the electric guitars were right next to the sandwich place, right? It's just a little corner. And I'd sit there and I'd play, back then I was younger, the cheap guitars. Like I'd be playing Epiphone and Ibanez and stuff. And there were always these old guys that would sit there, and actually my uncle, he would go there for lunch. And they would sit there and they would talk about guitars. And I don't know if maybe it was just because they would see a young whippersnapper or whatever there playing ungodly, weird riffs to them. And they would just start talking about different things. And they'd be talking about, the Fender guitars, they used to make them different. Like, I like when they had the nitro finish on the Fenders. And, they used to do this. And then when they would talk about Gibson, one of the things that they would talk about would be, they don't make them like they used to. Those things that you hear as a young person, that you say as an old person. Even down to the glue. They used to use hot hide glue on their guitars. Now they use this other crap, and they used to be better back then, and this and that, right? I also picked up a whole bunch of different things, so I learned to tune differently, apparently, than a whole bunch of people. So when I tune up to pitch. I say this in like a whole bunch of videos. I tune up to pitch, never down to pitch. If you tune down to pitch and you start bending, strings start to go flat, right? It makes sense. When you tune up to pitch, you tug on your strings. That pulls slack out of the nut, and then it also pulls slack and pulls tension around the posts. And then from there, your strings should start going flat because you're bending them and you're pulling that slack. Then you tune up to pitch again. Then you do it again. And then after that, you're all tuned up, and then you don't have that weird G-string issue that everyone talks about on Gibsons, which is way worse on Fender, but no one talks about it. Also learn things like your neck should never be flat. And as someone who's been, I've been selling some of my guitars here to help get some of the custom shops, and it is ridiculous when people show up and they grab a guitar and they do this. It's really funny when they say, it's a little out, because I bite my tongue a lot when it comes to that, because people do not understand that when it comes to a neck, it should not be flat. If it's flat and straight like that, you're going to have fret buzz at the first fret. I've actually done it with someone where I didn't, hold my tongue. And I said, do you know what you're looking for? And the moment I said it, I said, oh, that was a really stupid thing to say. You're going to insult the guy here who wants to buy this nice guitar. And I said, do you know what you're looking for? Oh, I need to make sure that the neck is flat and straight. I'm like, okay. Do you know how straight? Where should it be straight? All these different things. Well, it's got this little bow in it. And I said, excellent. Do you want me to make it straight for you? And I'll show you something. Well, he was like, yeah, can you do that? Yes. So I grabbed the truss rod adjustment tool and I adjusted the truss rod. And I made it straight. I said, go ahead and play it. I said, play around the 12th fret. Okay. Oh, this is great. Yeah. It's like, okay, excellent. Play on the first fret. And he played on the first fret. Why is there string buzz? It's because necks are not supposed to be perfectly straight. If you do that, you're going to have string buzz at the first fret. There should be a slight bow in it. And then I told him, when you're looking down the neck, you'll actually see that there's, you got that little arch there on the frets and the radius there on the fretboard as well. So that shouldn't be flat, which he did not know. And then you're actually looking for that ever so slight bow. And then you're making sure that the neck doesn't go like this or anything really weird, or you know what I mean, that it's flat here and then takes a dip. You're looking for consistencies in the neck, not the fact that the neck is straight. So I learned that from the old guys. So there's a whole bunch of different things that I've learned over the years that I try and make that connection with. I don't know if that's the right thing to do, but I just note that the Gibson custom shops feel extremely different, and in my mind, like extremely different. It's got that extra like 30% difference that just makes me always want to reach for them, and it just makes it harder for me to reach for the Gibson USAs. I still have an excellent time. They're still excellent guitars, but I just go for the custom shops more. But in the end, budget's always going to dictate a whole bunch of things, but in the end, it's down to your likes, your needs, and your preferences. So even though I prefer the Gibson custom shops over the Gibson USAs, doesn't mean that I think they're bad. And that doesn't mean that if you own the Gibson USA, I think lesser of you. If you own the Gibson USA and you like it, I think that you're a smart person. If you own the Epiphone version and you like it, I think you're a smart person. I really don't care. It's what's good for you, it's good for you, and what's good for me is good for me, and what's good for you, if it's easier on your wallet, it just means your wallet's happier. Maybe your wife too. Thanks for watching.